fastballs at 12 o'clock, a slider is probably sitting at 1. If you want to cut, then you got to be halfway between ones. And the point is, if you want to create velocity, which Joe was just talking about, start with the cutter, because that'll create the best arm speed possible, and then from there you can move off of that. So you can go from cutter to slider to slurve, and then ultimately take it all the way down to where you have a curveball, but you're doing it on a clock. If that makes sense. So if you're at 12 o'clock here, if you moved on the clock to 1 o'clock, you're in slider position. That would be the release position. If you go beyond that, you're probably going to get a slurve, which is what we call halfway between those two. It's not going to have as much velocity to it probably, because you're going to have more cut on the ball. So that would be one of the teaching points I think you can make with it. Again, it emphasizes the importance of arm speed with what you're doing. Mariano Rivera, guys, come on, he's made a living on just throwing one that's cutting. I mean, it's not moving but 5 or 6 inches, but it's high velocity. Guys think they're on the barrel and the ball catches them on the middle part of the bat or on the hands and traps them. So that's what we try to do. I very seldom use the gun to determine fastball. You know what they're doing with that. I want to know what is the differential, and the tighter that gap is, the more difficult it is. I mean, one of the things you can do is ask your hitters which breaking ball is harder to hit. I mean, who in the world's going to say, well, that big loopy breaking ball? I mean, you can sit on that thing and just drive it backside. The one that just wears people out is this one right there. That thing is there and gone, and it misses barrels. And that's what we're trying to do. That's why the velocity piece is so important, is we want to miss the middle of a barrel. In order to do that, you've got to have late bite and with velocity. When you find that combination, then you've got something I think pretty special to deal with. You know, Joe, he wouldn't even know this. This guy would, but that's what the difference maker was for him. He was our closer on our 2008 World Series team, and his slider was just lights out. And he got command of it, feel for it. Pitched inside two-seamer, kept people off balance, and then came back with a slider. And I still remember the last one he threw. And it was to win a game with the bases loaded 3-2 count, and boom, right there it was. Well, it was 2-2. Umpire missed the 1-4. So Joe threw it. So I called it again, and Joe executed. He finally gave it to him. Once the guy out, the game was over. But he didn't have that when he came in, and I think he'd tell you that was what allowed him to move to a totally different level and be our closer. So that team is where you are tightest on the seams. And whereas a cutter, the emphasis on the strength of the grip is on the middle. On the two-seamer, the strength is on the index finger. And what you've got to do is to make sure the thumb is tucked underneath right there. So it's going to be right in the center of the ball. Your hand naturally pronates. And I think the thing that's so important is to understand that if you do the mechanical things we talked about in the first section, which is to stay firm on the front side, you should naturally have two-seam movement, because your hand's going to pronate here properly, and the ball should come in, and at best, it's going to, well, let me rephrase that. At minimum, it's going to sink. At best, it sinks and moves. That's the one that's just a bear. And that's what you're trying to create with it. You've got to drill it, though. And again, what Joe had said earlier, if you're releasing it out here, it's not going to happen. If you are throwing two-seam fastballs that are waist high, they're not going to sink. I mean, you're not going to. You have to stay on this pitch, finish it out, and allow the ball then to fall where it should. And that's where you want to. We'll actually, and again, in our drill emphasis, Dane, come up here, just squat down for me right here. If I'm throwing to Dane, I'm right-handed, and we probably have taken the plate at this point, and he's actually split it so that this way. There you go. So that his crotch is right in the middle of that. Where I'm going to try to make it land is on his outside foot. So my drill work, that's where I want it to be, and again, it forces me to stay on it and stay down with it. So you try. I will say this, John, and I firmly believe, probably this applies to the majority of you in here. You know, I've been coaching at the college level for 36 years. I've had one guy that has been a true four-seam fastball guy. One guy. And he threw for 14 years in the big leagues, and he threw at 95, 96 miles an hour. If you want to make your guys effective, you get them to command two-seam fastballs. Because that's where most of us are going to live. That's where we're going to be. If you've got guys that are 80 miles an hour, if you've got guys that are 78 miles an hour, and you can teach them to get the ball to sink, you will always have the possibility of getting out of the worst of jams. Because that's a ground ball waiting to happen. And so that's why it's such an important thing. Spend time talking about guys climbing the ladder and getting command. If they miss with a four-seam fastball that ends up in here, you're looking at something that's lukewarm, and that's just going to get pulverized. You miss down in here, you know, guy's got to make a decision early. He still may swing over top of it. I'll tell you how you can tell whether you got it in the right place or not. And this is a telltale sign for us when we're calling pitches. If Dane is up at the plate right now, hitting from the right side, and we call for Jerry's two-seamer, and he gets hit on him, and he fouls it right off the top of his foot, we've got him exactly where we want him. Because that's exactly what that pitch did. It came in and had sink on it. He went after it. And it's even better if he hits it off his shin. You know? and you can probably be assured that we're going to call it again right behind it. You know, because again, it's in an area where he can't handle it, and it's just you got a chance if you can do that. So that's our guys will tell you that we, you know, of all of our fastball work, probably 75% of it has to do with two-seam command. That's where it is, over and over and over again. So, yeah. Cutter, which is, by the way, that's kind of the pitch now. Anytime that you can get your fingers out into the horseshoe, I think that because what you get is you get to use the strength of this entire seam right here. Here's an important point, just a tidbit, is if you set your middle finger on top of the seam, when you pull through on that, if it comes off, guess what you're on? The slick part of the ball. If, however, when you set up, you're on the inside part, and now you pull through it, you've got the seam. You've got a hold of it firmly. So right there is it. And then it's just a matter of moving your fingers down into the fatty part of your hand. That's the action on it right there. The back of the hand remains up to the sky.
Halfway between 1 and 12.
That's right. And you're gonna, and again, maybe less than that, depending, you know. But you're not going to be very far off. So wherever your clock is, that's all it takes. And all you're trying to do is to create that hard rotation. Yeah. And just stay with it right out here. The angle at which your hand is set is going to permit that late break to occur. So that's...
Fingers together?
Yep. Yeah, they're going to be pretty tight on that.
Okay.
Right. Like this.